So, good morning, and thank you for joining me in the presentation of my honors thesis, which explores the prospect of enhancing education through improved communication, focusing particularly on Senegal. Now, Senegal is a sub-Saharan West African nation, and the thing that's interesting about Senegal to me is that every year since 2014, Senegal has experienced more than 6% GDP growth. However, despite this growth, many of their educational and academic indicators remain stagnant or are not improving at the rates comparable to their investments. So the government of Senegal recently announced the Emerging Senegal Plan with the ultimate goal of reaching emerging market status by 2035 through the structural transformation of the economy, promoting human capital, and enabling good governance. Now, importantly, there is no mention here of education, but human capital, which refers to the experience, the skills, and the knowledge that can be applied to an economy, is understood to be strengthened primarily through education. Things such as the Mincer equation actually draw a direct correlation between years of schooling and human capital. Moreover, the World Bank has found that for every $1 invested in preschool education results in $6 to $17 in the form of a more productive and flourishing economy. Furthermore, they found that just one extra year of schooling increases income by at least 7%. Therefore, in order for Senegal to reach the proposed goals and its aspirations for being an emerging market by 2035, they must focus on the enhancement of education. Now, despite constant investments, only 51.9% of the adult population over the age of 15 is literate. Moreover, Senegal ranks 162 out of 188 countries on the Human Development Index, which measures everything from health to education to social and economic prosperity. And the average years of schooling for Senegalese men and women is 3.6 years and 2.1 years, respectively. And only 13% of the total population over the age of 24 has secondary education. Now, these statistics reflect deep systemic issues in the education system because for the last decade, for the last 5 years, Senegal has invested more than 21% of its GDP spending in education, which is more than the global average of 16%. Now, understanding their aspirations to become a flourishing economy, they have invested heavily in their education, understanding the correlation. However, there still remain stagnant reflections of poor education, and 47% of the Senegalese population lives in poverty. So, considering these two factors, I explored how these investments can be more effective and efficient in order to promote the economic prosperity of Senegal and as well as their educational outcomes to meet their economic goals. Now, in terms of improvement, I focused on communication, and the thesis operated through a definition of communication that includes the reliable and responsible and reliable data management, participation and cooperation in policy construction, and the accountable supervision of monitoring of development projects, supervision and monitoring of development projects. Now, each one of these is very important for effective development projects, but it begins with responsible and reliable data management. This is of paramount importance because without responsible and reliable data management, it is hard to disseminate the appropriate information to inform the future of policy reform. Moreover, it actually encourages and bolsters participation and cooperation through the sharing of information. And just to boil it down, if you don't have information about any particular subject, it doesn't have to be education, but if you don't have information and empirical evidence, it is hard to meaningfully contribute to any discussion about such topic. Therefore, not only is responsible and reliable data management important for informing indicators and tracking progress, but it is vital for the important participation and cooperation in policy construction. Finally, accountable supervision and monitoring. Especially in education, development projects require an extremely large amount of coordination between development partners, NGOs, government ministries, and the general citizenry. In order to ensure that these development projects are each carried out effectively, there needs to be an accountable supervising body. And now, each one of these aspects, the core principle of each is communication. You need to communicate to share data. You need to communicate to have meaningful participation. And you need to communicate to delineate the certain goals and roles within particular development projects. And that is why I have focused on these aspects of communication for my exploration. And for the first one, I ran into significant trouble with data management. Now, I do not mean to flood, I do not mean to overwhelm you with statistics, and you don't have to read every one of these indicators. But what I would like you to notice is that for many of these indicators, there is not enough data. There is, if any at all, right? And so these indicators, such as methodological soundness or transparency and community participation, they've been reported either once since 2012 or not at all. And so this speaks to the issue, and it may actually highlight the foundational problem in the education system in Senegal. Because if there is no data, there is nothing to inform the future of policy reform, much less to track the progress of the current programs. So before anything, I contend that the government of Senegal and its development partners must prioritize and urgently prioritize the good practices of data management, because data management and good practices of data management build the framework through which effective development can take place. Now, I'd like to draw your attention down here to the second little graph I have, and you can see that Senegal conforms to the UNESCO reporting and the IMF Special Data Dissemination Standard, which indicates which is not an indication of quality, rather than just showing that they meet the standards. But notice that since 2017, the statistical assessment capacity of Senegal has actually decreased. Now, as I alluded to earlier, data management is important for everything in terms of development, and particularly for participation, which is the next aspect of communication, which I have highlighted. Now, participation and cooperation in the construction of policy and development indicators cannot be overstated. Its importance cannot be overstated. Participation ensures the creation of appropriate indicators and results frameworks. It bolsters local ownership and appropriation of development programs, and it creates the much needed flexibility within enhancement projects. Now, Senegal is rich in cultural and geographic diversity. You can go to the northeastern part of Senegal and practically be in the sub-Saharan desert, in the Saharan desert. Likewise, you can go to the south, past Gambia, and you can be in the jungle. And similar to these geographic diversities, the cultural and social diversities are equally expansive. Therefore, each region, each community in Senegal will need a tailored development program, right? The one program that works in the metropolitan center, the capital of Dakar, will not be the same program that works in the Casamance region, in the rural Casamance region, where there is not as much electrification. Therefore, participation and cooperation are vitally important to the construction of these development indicators and the future of policy reform. Because without it, they may be developing programs and results frameworks that do not fit the needs and the capacity of these governments. It's like a soccer player may not be able to play a game as well if he is wearing a size 10 shoe and he only has a size 7 foot. Yes, it may be doing something, but it is not the effective and efficient production of outputs from the investments. So that is the importance for creating the indicators and results frameworks. But also, following that, it bolsters local ownership. And if development indicators and results frameworks do not appropriately reflect the situation in these unique communities, then local authorities, teachers, and principals may not appropriately appropriate these development measures because they may not see them as fitting to their situation. So finally, accountable supervision and monitoring. Now, accountable supervision and monitoring is important to ensure the installation of the first two priorities, because in order to improve communication channels through which data is shared and through which participation and cooperation are encouraged, you need accountable supervision and monitoring. As I've said before, development projects, particularly concerning education, require an incredible amount of cooperation. And without accountable supervision and monitoring, Senegal and its development partners may continue to experience these ineffective outputs from their incredible investments in education. Now, vitally, not only is accountable supervision and monitoring important for the establishment of good communication practices in terms of data management and participation, but the absence of data and the absence of participation can actually undermine the role of supervision itself. Because if there is no information on progress, and if there is no voice of local representation in these development models or these indicators, then it is hard for supervisors to know what they are supervising. So,
excuse me, Dylan, forgive me for interrupting. Just a note, you're at the 12-minute mark, so.
Okay, well, I'll wrap it up. Okay, so in sum, my thesis found through analysis and literature review, it found that the most meaningful solution to educational enhancement in Senegal will be a solution that urgently prioritizes these vital measures of communication. Because without bolstering these practices of communication, they may not have sufficient data, sufficient participation, and accountable supervision, which are all three vital for effective development and effective enhancement of education in Senegal. So that brings me to an end, and I appreciate your time and consideration for listening to my presentation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dylan, for that great presentation.